Hi guys, welcome to my channel, Women in History. You can call me E. Here I highlight a woman who has made a difference in society, their community, or has accomplished something that was very challenging. That can be for good or bad reasons. This series will be known as Stargazers, as we highlight women's accomplishments and contributions in the field of astronomical studies. The first woman we will be looking at today is German astronomer Maria Margareta Kirch, who was one of the first famous astronomers of her period due to her writing on the conjunction of the Sun with Saturn, Venus, and Jupiter. Maria Margareta Kirch, born Maria Winckelmann on February 25, 1670, was educated from an early age by her father, a Lutheran minister, who believed that she deserved an education equivalent to that given to young boys. Unfortunately, by the age of 13, she had lost both her father and mother. But by that time, she had also received a general education from her brother-in-law, Justinus Tollner, and the well-known self-taught astronomer Christoph Arnold, who lived nearby in the town of Summerfield and was credited with being the first to discover a passing comet. She became Arnold's unofficial apprentice and later his assistant, living with him and his family. As previously mentioned, studying astronomy had no formal structure and it was not organized entirely along guild lines during this time period. A guild is an association of artisans and merchants who oversee the practice of their craft/trade in a particular territory. The earliest types of guild formed as organizations of tradespeople belonging to a professional association. They sometimes depended on grants or letters of patent from a monarch or other ruler to enforce the flow of trade to their self-employed members and to retain ownership of tools and the supply of materials, but were regulated by the local government. Guild members found guilty of cheating the public would be fined or banned from the guild. Now, as a result of a lack of structure to study astronomy, the journey to become an astronomer often looked very different on a case-by-case basis. The majority of astronomers during this time period did not have official degrees in astronomy. Instead, most astronomers boasted degrees in medicine, law, or theology, and they learned astronomy independently or through apprenticeship. This meant women interested in astronomy faced a barrier of not finding support for their study, since at the time women weren't even allowed to attend college and were not afforded journeyman years during their apprenticeship. This did not completely exclude women from practicing astronomy, mostly because the work of astronomy and the observations of the heavens took place largely outside the universities. However, any education they got on the subject was wholly reliant on those in their household providing them training. When it came time for Maria to get married, she made a strategic choice, not for financial security, but to further her knowledge in astronomy. Through Christoph Arnold, Maria met the famous German astronomer and mathematician Gottfried Kirch, who was 30 years her senior and had received training in astronomy by Johann Hevelius and a formal education at the University of Jena. They married in 1692, later having 4 children, all of whom followed their parents by studying astronomy. Both Kirch and Maria benefited from this union. Kirch had a wife to take care of his children and an assistant to run calculations, gather data, and otherwise assist him. Meanwhile, Maria was able to continue her education in astronomy. Without their union, it is unlikely that Maria Kirch would have been able to participate in astronomy independently. In 1700, the couple moved to Berlin as the elector ruler of Brandenburg Frederick III, later Frederick I of Prussia, had appointed Gottfried Kirch as the astronomer royal, a position awarded to an eminent astronomer. Gottfried Kirch gave his wife further instruction in astronomy, as he did for his sister and all his children. Due to societal norms and beliefs of the given time period, women were not allowed to attend universities in Germany. Thus, Kirch became one of the few women active in astronomy in the 1700s. She became widely known as the Kirchin, the feminine version of the family name. Maria and Gottfried worked together as a team. In typical guild fashion, she advanced from her position as Arnold's apprentice to become assistant to her husband. Her husband had studied astronomy at the University of Jena and has served as apprentice to Johann Hevelius. So, at the Berlin Academy of Sciences, Maria worked as Gottfried's unofficial but recognized assistant. Together, they made observations and performed calculations to produce calendars and ephemerides. An ephemerides was a book with tablets that gave the trajectory of naturally occurring astronomical objects and artificial satellites in the sky, i.e., the position and possible velocity over time. Historically, positions were given as printed tables of values given at regular intervals of date and time. The calculations of these tables was one of the first applications of mechanical computers. Modern ephemerides are often provided in electronic form. However, printed ephemerides are still produced as they are useful when computational devices are not available. From 1697, the Kirches also began recording weather information. Their data was used to produce calendars and almanacs, and it was also very useful in navigation. The Academy of Sciences in Berlin handled sales of their calendars to the public. Women's position in the sciences was akin to their position in the guilds, valued but subordinate. At the time, her husband did not hold an independent chair at the academy, and the Kirches worked as a team on common problems. The couple observed the heavens together. He observed the north and she the south, making observations that a single person could not have conducted accurately, as there would have been too many to do alone. During the first decade of her work at the academy as her husband's assistant, Kirch would observe the heavens every evening starting at 9 p.m. During such a routine observation, she discovered a comet. On April 21, 1702, Kirch identified the so-called Comet of 1702. Today, there is no doubt about Kirch's priority in discovering C1702H1. However, at the time, her husband was credited with the discovery. In his notes from that night, her husband recorded, "Early in the morning, about 2 a.m., the sky was clear and starry. Some nights before, I had observed a variable star, and my wife, as I slept, wanted to find and see it for herself. In so doing, she found a comet in the sky. at which time she woke me and I found that it was indeed a comet. I was surprised that I had not seen it the night before. While Kirch was the first to identify the object as a comet, it had, unbeknownst to her, been independently sighted, but not properly identified, during the previous night by Italian astronomers Francesco Bianchini and Giacomo Filippi Maraldi. As a result, Bianchini and Maraldi were given official credit for the comet's discovery. While I'm sure this lack of recognition was disheartening, Kirch continued to pursue her astronomy work, publishing in German under her own name and with proper recognition. Her publications, which included her observations on the aurora borealis in 1707, the pamphlet Von der Conjunction des Sons des Centauri und der Venus, on the conjunction of the Sun with Saturn and Venus in 1709, and the approaching conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 1712, became her lasting contributions to astronomy. Before Kirch, the only female astronomer in the Holy Roman Empire who had published under her own name had been Maria Kirch. In 1709, Berlin Academy of Sciences president Gottfried von Leibniz presented her to the Prussian court, where Kirch explained her sightings of sunspots. He said about her, "There is a most learned woman who could pass as a rarity. Her achievement is not in literature or rhetoric, but in the most profound doctrines of astronomy. I do not believe that this woman easily finds her equal in the science in which she excels. She favors the Copernican system, the idea that the sun is at rest, like all the learned astronomers of our time. And it is a pleasure to hear her defend that system through the Holy Scripture, in which she is also very learned. She observes with the best observers and knows how to handle marvelously the quadrant and the telescope." After Maria's husband died in 1710, Kirch attempted to assume his place as astronomer and calendar maker at the Royal Academy of Sciences. Her actions were representative of a well-established principle that allowed widows to take over their husband's craft after their death. Despite her petition being supported by Leibniz, the president of the Academy, the Executive Council of the Academy rejected her demand for a formal position, saying that what we concede to her could serve as an example in the future. The council did not wish to set a precedent by appointing a woman. Despite the fact that roughly 14% of astronomers in the early 18th century were female, it was still extremely uncommon at the time for women to become members of scientific academies. Maria's denial to the Academy was important in that it emphasized the separation between men and women's roles in the workplace and the normalcy of women's exclusion to scientific academies at the time and for many years after, despite their abilities. Maria appealed this decision, arguing that she was well qualified because she had been instructed by her husband in astronomical calculation and observation. She emphasized that she had engaged in astronomical work since her marriage and had worked at the Academy since her husband's appointment 10 years earlier. In her petition, Kirch said that for some time, while my dear departed husband was weak and ill, I prepared the calendar from his calculations and published it under his name. For Kirch, an appointment at the Academy would have not been just a mark of honor, but a vital source of income for her and her children. She even clarified this in her petition, explaining that her husband had not left her with sufficient means in terms of supporting herself and her family. In the old guild tradition of trades, it would have been possible for Kirch to take over her husband's position after his death, but the new institutions of science tended not to follow that tradition. Despite Maria and Gottfried both having spent years working on calendars and discovering a comet each, the one item Maria did not have that almost everyone in the academy did was a university education. Unfortunately, negative opinion towards her gender outweighed her history of competent work. In 1711, the Academy relented upon Maria enough to give her a medal for her work in astronomy, but continued to deny her applications to the Academy. Johann Heinrich Hoffmann, who had little experience, was appointed to her husband's place instead of her. Hoffmann soon fell behind with his work and failed to make required observations. It was suggested that Maria become his assistant to catch him up, which was a very bitter pill she did not choose to swallow. In 1711, she published a well-received pamphlet in which she predicted a new comet, followed by a pamphlet concerning Jupiter and Saturn. In 1712, Kirch accepted the patronage of Bernhard Friedrich von Krosigk, who was an enthusiastic amateur astronomer, and began work in his observatory. She and her husband had worked at Krosigk's observatory while the Academy Observatory was being built. At Krosigk's observatory, she reached the rank of master astronomer. After Baron von Krosigk died in 1714, Kirch moved to Danzig to assist a professor of mathematics for a short time before returning to Berlin in 1716. Kirch and her son, who had just finished university, received an offer to work as astronomers for the Russian Tsar Peter the Great, but preferred to remain in Berlin, where she continued to calculate calendars for locales such as Nuremberg, Dresden, Breslau, and Hungary from her home. Maria would not return to the Academy until 1716, when her son Kreisfried was appointed as an observer after Hoffmann's death, at which point her and her daughter served as her son's assistants. Unfortunately, this plan to get back into the Academy did not go smoothly. Male Academy members complained that she took too prominent a role and was too visible at the observatory when strangers visit. Kirch was ordered to retire to the background and leave the talking to her son. In 1717, the Berlin Academy gave Maria two options. One, either continue to fight for a position of her own, or she could retire in the interests of her son's reputation. She chose to retire and continue her own observations at home, which the Academy requested be nearby so that her son could still dine at home without neglecting his duties at the Academy. Kirch died of a fever in Berlin on December 29, 1720. The family friend and vice president of the Berlin Academy of Sciences, Alphonse des Vignoles, said in Kirch's eulogy, "If one considers the reputations of Frau Kirch and Frau Kunitz, one must admit that there is no branch of science in which women are not capable of achievement, and that in astronomy in particular, Germany takes prize above all other states in Europe. So, not going to lie, the ending of Maria's story makes me so sad. The fact that she was so undeniably skilled and recognized by so many of her peers and still was barred by a professional institution because of her gender. I can't even imagine dying with that ball sitting on your mind. And for them to promote her son, a son that she raised and had a hand in training to be an astronomer, the nerve. Anyway, that is the end of our video. If you learned something new, please consider giving a like and subscribe. And if you have a name suggestion that is in line with a series I'm doing, you can send it to womeninhistory39@gmail.com. And give me just a brief summary, a little bit information about the person you're recommending, just to make sure when I'm doing my research, I am researching the right person. That would be very helpful. Thank you. So without further ado, this is the end of our video. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, and I will see you next time. Peace.